Hi there, and welcome back to Anchor Point, the podcast from Freedom's Advocate. I'm your host, Randy Crossan. Thanks for joining me again. You probably noticed at the grocery store, same jar, same label, same price, but somehow there's less inside. That's shrinkflation. And in 2025, it wasn't just happening to groceries, it was happening to freedom. So here's a simple question to start with. If your freedoms were slowly shrinking, would you notice? Not all at once, not with a headline, but bit by bit, through policy changes, quiet decisions, and rules that seem reasonable until one day you realize something important is gone. That was 2025 in Canada. It wasn't a year of dramatic crackdowns. It was a year of pressure on speech, on conscience, on faith, on privacy. And most of it arrived wrapped in good intentions. Throughout the year, Freedom's Advocate focused on one core idea, early warning. Because freedoms are rarely taken by force. They're surrendered when no one stops asking hard questions early enough. We saw that play out in real cases involving real people. Students disciplined for lawful expression, parents pushed aside in decisions about their own children, citizens blocked from speaking at public meetings, professionals facing consequences not for misconduct, but for expressing their beliefs outside of work. These weren't abstract charter debates. They were everyday reminders that rights only protect us when institutions respect limits on their own power. 2025 also forced an uncomfortable look at the state of the Charter itself. In post-pandemic Canada, government overreach has started to feel normal. Emergency thinking has lingered, and once governments take new powers, they're rarely eager to give them back. What made this year especially concerning is that this pattern cuts across all political lines. Different leaders, same instincts. Move fast, centralize authority, justify it later. Privacy became one of the clearest examples. With the rollout of Canada's consumer-driven banking framework, often called open banking, Canadians were told this is about personal convenience and control. But what we showed is how systems described as voluntary can quickly become expected and then unavoidable. When your financial data becomes widely accessible, autonomy doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. And once a system is built, opting out becomes harder than opting in ever was. That focus on early education shaped everything we did last year. Freedom's Advocate expanded its public education work with clear, practical resources on the foundations of our freedoms. We examined why the Charter acknowledges God and why that still matters. We broke down the rule of law, not as a slogan, but as a safeguard against arbitrary power. We explored freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and the right to peaceful assembly, grounding each one in real Canadian experiences. This wasn't academic theory. It was about helping everyday Canadians understand what their rights actually mean and how they're being challenged. Anchor Point became part of that mission. This podcast was never meant to chase outrage or headlines. It was built to slow things down, to create space for reflection. We looked at assisted suicide failures, parental consent in schools, free speech in local governance, and the growing cost of speaking openly in Canada. The pattern was consistent. When dissent is treated as disruption instead of participation, democracy weakens. As 2025 came to a close, our attention shifted forward. Proposed legislation that could criminalize religious expression drawn from sacred texts, expanding data sharing frameworks that threaten personal privacy, a cultural shift where faith and conscience are tolerated only as long as they remain private and silent. None of this corrects itself automatically, and none of it stops just because we're busy or tired and not paying attention. If there's one lesson from 2025, it's this: freedoms are rarely taken all at once. They're narrowed slowly, quietly, and politely until what once allowed debate is silenced. The most dangerous moment for a free society isn't chaos, it's comfort. It's when people assume someone else is watching, someone else is speaking, someone else will draw the line. At Freedom's Advocate, our work exists for that exact moment, to sound the alarm early, to explain what's happening clearly, and to defend the freedoms that don't protect themselves. As we move into 2026, the question isn't whether pressure on freedoms will continue. It will. The question is whether Canadians will notice it in time, and whether they'll be ready to stand. Thanks for watching today. One good way you can get involved is to forward this podcast to others. Those you know might be interested, and especially those you think don't know what's happening in our country. This has been Anchor Point, the podcast from Freedom's Advocate. I'm Randy Crossan. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.